So you've got great ideas, great experiences, productions you want to create for your audience, and you want to use that creativity to make the greatest impact you can and be cutting edge with all that you are. Now the question is, how are you going to do this, and how are you going to maintain that creativity throughout the year? Well, there's three things you have to do. Well, at least three things. But you need to do this. You need to care about your physical health. You need to care about your creative life. So creativity doesn't dry out, but you keep finding a way to regenerate those ideas. And thirdly, you've got to care for your soul. We have a culture that talks a lot about self-care, but we need to talk about soul care. It's not just exercise. It's not just eating right. You've got to care for your soul, or your soul will slowly shrivel and you'll be missing that spark of creativity and that joy that comes through in your enthusiasm. First, I want to talk to you about your physical health, and I'm not going to belabor this. I'm not an expert. There are thousands of experts online and YouTube videos and Google queries you can search to find this out. But I just want to say this. You need to take your physical health serious. Just because your job may be primarily using your mind and pursuing creative outlets doesn't mean you don't need to be healthy. You need blood to get to the brain. So go exercise. You need time to eat the right diet so you get that mental focus and you have that calm. You're not overly anxious. You're not getting lethargic because of a bad diet. You need to take care of your diet and your exercise so that you continue to have a great creative output. Next, I want to talk to you about your creative life. You have to foster it. There are times where it feels like creativity just flows and times where you get that writer's block, so-called, or creative block. You've got to keep fueling yourself with new ideas. Creativity is not coming to silo. That's the famous quote, all artists are kleptomaniacs. My jazz professor used to say, we borrow ideas from everywhere. And that's what creativity is. If it's an obvious answer, it's not really worthy of making artwork about. The obvious is obvious. Art comes from that which is creative, making new connections. So you've got to get out there and find new connections. And I don't want to take too long with this, but I want to give you just a few suggestions to help you fuel that creativity when you get in a rut. And here they are. First, go to a museum, go see an art show, especially if you're not a visual artist. And go to a play, and especially if you're not a thespian, you're not in that theater world. Get outside your own genre. Cross-pollinate, get ideas from other places. Go to a concert, go to a park, and just observe the uniqueness of other people. Do some people watching. The beauty of creation. It's designed to feed your soul by God himself. And other things, go try a new restaurant. And don't order the same old dish. Don't go to a Thai restaurant and get the same dish you always get. Go to a new restaurant and get a different dish. Ask the waiter or chef to surprise you. Then do things like recalling what made you fall in love with creativity. And take a minute and write some thank you notes to the people who have impacted you along the way. Read a magazine you would not ordinarily read. If you're into nature, then go read some high-tech magazine. If you're all into technology, go read some hiking magazine or something else. But read a very different resource. Another great idea, I remember reading this a book years ago on creativity. Take a few hours and spend it with a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. Use those resources. Go talk to children. Listen to them. Another idea, spend time studying something new online or read books or taking classes locally about something new. Get your brain developing in a new area. And also take time to journal your thoughts and write things you are thankful for. Two separate ideas there. A journal about what happened today, what you enjoyed, or processing something. It can be a spiritual journal. It can be more of a project-based journal or relationship. But also, either at the end of that day, take time for this, or separately, have a journal of gratitude. And it's funny, even non-Christians are getting on this bandwagon. You need to say thanks. Well, the Bible tells us over and over, I will enter his courts with thanksgiving in my heart. Not just because God has been good, but because that fills us with joy. Giving gratitude, giving thanks, fills you up. It's this mysterious opportunity for us to find joy even as we express gratitude toward others. So a thank you or gratitude journal. And the last thing is share your struggle with a good friend or colleague. Vulnerability is powerful in reigniting your creativity. So spend time with someone you trust. And if you don't have anyone, then take baby steps. Don't jump in and vomit up all your family problems and past abuse and whatever else. take baby steps, but find people and pursue intimacy relationally through opening up bit by bit, and find someone you can share. This is what I'm doing creatively. This is what I'm struggling with my wife or my husband or my children or my grandparents. But you need someone else in that journey. So try that as well. These are things that just fuel creativity. If you're sitting in the studio, locked in your studio, you're not allowing all those ideas and all those sources of ingenuity and problems and precocious ideas to percolate up into your brain. The third one is self-care and community. It's very easy for artists, unless you are in a collaborative environment like theater or producing a film or TV show, you can't be alone and get that done. But if you're a fine artist, or even if you're an actor doing monologues or a comedian, it can be easy to isolate, and that's not healthy for you. You need community. Community is essential to your creative health, and when you withdraw and isolate yourselves, you run into a problem. You run into a problem that you were not designed to be alone. Loneliness kills the soul bit by bit. You know, when artist communities talk about community, often there's this romantic idea. We talk about J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis as part of the Inklings meeting at a pub in Oxford and pushing each other creatively, and that's why they're so good. Or we talk about the Fauves in Paris and people like Henri Matisse, Georges Braque, and pushing each other creatively in that era. And I'm sure they did push each other creatively, and it is kind of the Bible talks about iron sharpening iron, and this probably is creativity, pushing and finding creative synergy and pushing one another. But if we focus just on the achievement, we forget the rest of the human body and the rest of our experience and our emotions. I'm sure what also happened in those moments is Tolkien and Lewis just had a beer and talked about life and the beauty of the gardens around Oxford. I'm sure in the salons in France with the Fauves, they talked about the beauty of the river and the lovely time having a tea or a cafe or a croissant and just enjoying Paris. And there's a value of community outside of trying to push each other to achieve things. And you need this. We all need community. Isolation shrivels the soul. Community enlarges the soul. So don't neglect community. The last thing I want to talk about is soul care, or care for your soul. And I don't mean self-care. That's a very different thing. If you want to read a great book on this, Soul Keeping by John Ortberg. It's really a conversation with Dallas Willard. And he pulls apart the difference between self-care, what our culture talks about, and soul care. And self-care, he says, will lead to narcissism, consumerism, and depression. Art is not going to satisfy your soul. Work is not going to satisfy your soul. Your soul longs for something eternal, something beautiful, and something loving. The only true source of these things is God Himself. So take time to nurture your relationship with God. Take care to deal with your soul. The very core of who you are, not just your feelings, not just your ideas, but your very soul, the way God made it. Here's a few ideas. Take time to pray every day. It can be you can read through prayers in a book of great prayers, or you can just spontaneously pray, or you can just spend time in silence, but take time to pray. Secondly, spend time with other believers. This is like the recommendation for community, but you need time with other believers in your church and your small group. Third, take time to read the Bible. If you want to hear God's voice, read His Word. Fourth, practice the Sabbath. One of the few commandments in the Old Testament, in the Ten Commandments, that is given a reason for this commandment, and there are different reasons in the two places we get the Ten Commandments. And I do a separate talk on that on the Ten Commandments talk. You can look for that in our series on the Ten Commandments. But one of the points is taking a Sabbath reminds you that you are not your work. Taking a day off gives your heart and your mind and your body a day to reflect and say, yeah, I'm not just an art creator. I don't just produce art, or I'm just not part of a production. I'm a human being made in the image of God. And just like God, 6 days of creation, I need a day of rest to recharge and take time to do something sacred, go to church, spend time with people, and refuel my soul. The last thing I want to say is you need to preach to your heart. If you've heard me speak on this topic, you know how passionate I am about this, but I think this is a major problem in our society. Martin Lloyd-Jones said, "This is the very essence of wisdom in this matter. Have you realized that most of your unhappiness in life is due to the fact that you are listening to yourself instead of talking to yourself. And if you consider the Psalms, David has great joy, but he's listening to his heart. He starts listening to his heart. Oh, life is frustrating. He's honest about, where are you, God? What's going on here? But then he turns and he preaches to his heart. And he said, yet I will trust in you. The last thing I want to encourage you to do is this: savor life and savor beauty. Take time to watch the sunset, visit a local park, go for a hike. Maybe for you to savor something is just take time to savor a great cappuccino or a cup of tea, or take time to think and process and turn all the electronic devices off. We may have only years left on this earth, we may have decades, but we want to make the most of them and use our gifts to contribute as much as we can to our culture, to our society, to our loved ones. If we're going to do that, then we need to take care of our physical health, of our creative life. We need to be in community and develop those relationships. We need to care for our soul and take time to just savor the experiences of life. Don't rush through it. Stop. Smell the roses. Stop. Look at that beautiful sunset. Pause. Consider great design wherever you see it. Hope this is encouraging to you, and you will think about how to take time to nurture your soul and develop your creativity so it continues to grow throughout the year. My name is Joel Pelso. I'm with Arts and Entertainment Ministries. God bless. Have a great year.